So yeah. Welcome to 44 and 1 with Tempest and GVizzle. Today we're trying something once again a little bit different. I have a list of philosophical questions, and tell me when to stop, sir.
Stop.
Is it more important to help yourself, help your family, help your society, or help the world?
Help yourself, because then all the other things can follow. I think you have to have your house in order before you and have yourself as functional as possible, so that you then, once you've built yourself up, then you can give more to everyone else.
I agree. That was easy.
Yeah.
You know, it makes me think of like when my dad was in the hospital. My mom was there all day, and we just kept trying to push her to, like, you need to take care of yourself, because you're no good to anyone if you're no good to yourself, and you can't put that care forward and while letting yourself fall apart. So
Exactly.
I agree with you 100%.
But is there any devil's advocate or anything? Like, you know, is there any counter arguments people might say, do you think? Or
I
we
think
just
there's a lot
so
of people who no, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people who say, like, no, you take care of your family first and then they'll take care of you. Like, I think it all comes back down to maybe it's a level of honesty.
Yeah.
Like, everyone wants to be the hero of their own story, so you will selflessly sacrifice yourself for the benefit of others when you're doing better for them if you take care of yourself first. And this is interesting because it ties in with the book that I'm currently reading. How would humanity change if all humans' life expectancy was significantly increased, let's say, to 500 years?
Oh, yeah, that is actually highly relevant. Interesting. I think part of it, like, in line with the book you're actually reading, it would depend on what that longevity looks like.
Okay, so let's share with everyone the book that I'm reading, because this one, the question assumes that everyone has the same lifespan, where the book, which is How to Stop Time by Matt Haig, is there's a handful of people globally that they age normally until the age of 11 or 12, and then every 15-ish years they age 1 year, so that you could look 40 but be 400. So in this one, everyone lives to be 500. So similar, but not similar.
Do you think that's what Paul Rudd is doing?
Yes. 1,000%. There's someone else, not just Paul Rudd. There's someone else too, who's not aged. Can't think of it right now, but yeah. I think Paul Rudd sold his soul to the devil or Thanos.
Yeah, and I think that the little show that he was in with Aisling B, and where it was like, you'd go to this clinic and then it would rejuvenate you, then you come back out refreshed and fine. I think he's doing what was in that, and then it was actually a documentary, not a sitcom.
I did see a Korean horror movie once. It was like I forget what it was called, but it was like different short horror movies all into one. And one of them was that, like, the secret of youth, women would pay for the secret of youth, but really they were just eating like they were eating babies, and like as you were eating them, you were absorbing their youth, and that's how they stayed young.
Yeesh. Do you know what that film was called?
I do not. I will try to track it down.
Yeah, because I quite like to watch that. I quite like those sort of vignette type movies, you know. But like, I quite liked which was it? New York, I Love You, or something like that. Oh yeah. It was really just sappy, but I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I think I think if our developmental stages biologically and psychologically, I think they would adjust over time to accommodate the 500 years. So I think that your childhood and your development stage is probably proportional to the lifespan of your species. Just a theory, but like.
So in your version of this, you wouldn't go from teenager to adult at 18. You would be a toddler for 5 years or 10, 15 years, and then you'd be a teenager for 50 years, and then like, is that how you're saying it would all be relative within that lifespan?
If that's so, this is where I think it's can't get my words out. I think this is the important bit where, like, it depends on that the early developmental stage. Like, are they just extending our adulthood, Or is all of our biology and development changed so that everything becomes relative?
It says life expectancy was significantly increased. So life expectancy is 500 years. So I think we could take it either way, that all of a sudden you become an adult at 20, theoretically, and then your retirement age goes from 65 to 408.
Well, there was I watched a French TV show on Netflix. I think it was called Ad Vitam, and it was actually it's just sprung into my mind now. This is exactly what it was about. So they figure out how to extend our lives for like hundreds of years, but they're still procreating. But then childhood becomes longer. So I think that you're still a child at like 31, and then at 30,
amazing.
Yeah, and then at 31, you're allowed to take the rejuvenation treatment because your DNA development's all finished, and then you can have this rejuvenation. Then you can live for like 200 or 300 years.
So then at 31, would you become like a tween, where you
Exactly.
begin like, then your parents need to start talking to you about like periods and stuff?
Yeah. And that's what was really interesting in the show, like all the little undertones going on, that just the way that they were infantilizing what we would see as adults, but then they would still go through puberty and get the periods at the same time as their parents or grandparents did. But yeah.
Oh, so excuse me, physiologically you'd be the same, so you'd still get your period at 13, 14.
Yeah,
you'd be having wet dreams at 13, 14.
34 for me, but yeah.
but you would still, I guess, be developmentally 13, 14, even though your body could look, or you would be developmentally 13, 14 until you were like 30-ish. Like it would just extend all of that. Would school then be extended, so now you're in school for 75 years?
Well, this is where it was like at the stage of where the technology had been in use. It had been in use for about 100 years, I think, or 180 years in the show. So they were actually still adjusting and figuring this out. So there was a lot of like all these subtexts about, can we trust these people to vote and make decisions if they're so young? But, they're like 25 or 30 years old. But
18-year-olds vote now.
Exactly. So they're treat because the vast majority of society is now like 150 years old, and there's not as many youth anymore. So they start valuing the younger people less for a longer period of time.
So in that, and maybe we decide on the ground rules. So are you still able? Does procreation age end at the same time? Like, do women still go through menopause at 50 and then they live to be 500, or they're going through menopause now at 300?
If they start their rejuvenation treatment before they go through menopause, then they'll never have menopause. They can procreate. There's actually a character in the show that wants a baby and she gets pregnant, but she's like 160.
So then that creates a ton of overpopulation problems. And then resource problems.
Yeah, they actually pass a law in the show to disallow procreation.
Oh,
yeah.
Like forever, or are you capped at a certain number?
No, forever. It's like in France they vote. No, you're not allowed children anymore. This is if you're not pregnant by this date, you're never allowed children.
So then, once that last group of people gets through the aging process, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of sad.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely a very French TV show. Yeah, there's
be some sort of balance. Like maybe they open it up, right? Like every 100 years, it's like this is the year of procreation. So you can like have them if you want them, and then we like lock it down again. So there's always there's got to be some sort of continuing on with the civilization.
Yeah, that's one of the subplots I really liked in the show, was just this constant battle between youth and creativity and enthusiasm, and then just like these jaded older people that were melancholy and they've given themselves over to materialism and all this stuff. But like the younger people still have that zest for life that the older people don't. It's really interesting.
And your zest for life would just last a lot longer. Like that would be, I see both sides of it. Like it would be super cool to be able to be around and see how things are going to change. Cause I mean, imagine like just the change that I've seen in my lifetime, and like to be able to see what's going to be different in 400 years, that would be amazing. But then I was reading a book, it's called Death with Interruptions, or Death with Interruptions by Zé Saramago. He's a Portuguese author. And in it, one day, Death just decides she doesn't want to do it anymore. So nobody dies.
Mm.
And at first, everyone is super excited about it because they're going to live forever. But then they're like, shit, now I got to care for my dying mother who's never going to die. Like,
Yeah.
I'm never going to get that inheritance. I'm going to have to be like changing her diapers forever because she's not going to die. Like the reality of it starts to set in where they're like, no. Like, yeah, it's sad and everything. Wow. But we need people to die.
Yeah. It's part of the transition of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in this show, because people just aren't used to actually, people don't know what death is anymore. And so they have to have actual people to come around. Like if somebody's died that they know, someone has to come around and coach them through it and remind them what death is.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So my husband's family, he's got quite a large family. And we've been together for 26 years. And in the time that we have been together, there have been, I would say, like fewer than half a dozen deaths in his family. Wow. My family is not that big. And in that same time frame, we've had like over a dozen. So I'm laughing about it because it's just so bizarre. Like his family just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and ours is getting smaller and smaller. And like the first time, I think one of the first times that like he was at a funeral, it was just kind of like it was so different than the ones that his family experiences that it was like it was jarring for him because we're you know, a lot of Portuguese people are very traditional in the way that we mourn, right? So there's an open casket typically for 3 days. There's 3 days of viewings and 3 days of mourning, and then there's the funeral, and everyone's sad, and everyone wears like head to toe black. And red is a no-go. I once showed up at a viewing, and I had come straight from work, and I was wearing gray pants, and they had the faintest pink pinstripe in them. And when I sat down, my mom was like, "I can't believe you wore red pants."
Oh my god.
Yeah. And then like when his stepdad passed away, he called me that morning and said, "Don't wear black." And I was like, I don't understand what that means, because my entire life, if I bought something, even when I was 5 or 6, if my mom bought me something black, she would be like, "This is good for when your grandfather dies." And I'd be like, "Is he sick?"
Yeah.
And that was like just always our thing. But like his family, the funeral was like a celebration of life. So when we got to the funeral home, like the casket was closed. It was off in a corner. There were no chairs. Like there was no auditorium seating looking at the casket. Everyone was walking around and talking and sharing stories. And then the day of the funeral, everyone was in brightly colored clothes. And it was so shocking to see how the differences in how they dealt with death was. Totally. And like it was new-ish to him, but like going through back to try to circle it back, like going through 400 years and not experiencing that, you would have to be like, is it black at the funeral, or can I wear this color? Like, what do I do? What's the thing? Like,
well, it's in this show, like it's even got to the point where it's been so long and so few people die now that people don't even know what it is. They can't comprehend something not being anymore. Like, that doesn't exist anymore. That person's no longer. And then they're like, but haven't they got work tomorrow?
But wouldn't there still be accidents, and wouldn't there still be like people who unalive themselves? Like you'd think that there would still be some sort of natural deaths.
Yeah, but it's kind of at the
or unnatural.
I think it's because it's the amount of deaths in the population. The number of people that will have contact with that is so few that the majority of the population is just not a thing to them anymore.
Do they still have illnesses? Like, would you still have, is cancer still a thing in that?
They don't really go into that much, but I don't think it was because of the rejuvenation that they go in these pods like every night or every few nights. And then they like, it didn't seem that anybody was sick or anything. So yeah. But
interesting.
And the other weird thing is that depending on your genes, there are a small percentage of people that can't be rejuvenated. So they still go through all the problems of the death and the dying and getting ill. And then you've got like this futuristic version of a hippie commune who don't want the technology, even if they're eligible for it. And then society shuns them because they want to die. So people think they're weird.
I could totally see that. It was like people who like religion versus non-religious people. And interesting.
Yeah. It's a good show. Yeah. I don't think I've really spoiled because I know that that's the main plot. So that's all just background stuff.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think that would do for? I mean, it says humanity. How would humanity change? Like, would people give more of a shit about social situations? Would there be more concern about standard of care, quality of life in like third world countries, because there's now we're all living longer, there's more opportunity to affect long-term change? How would politics change? Like, you know, if would it be a 4-year term for a president, or would it be a 40-year term for like, how would that social structure work?
I think my hunch would be that it would depend on the culture that exists in the first place. I think I'm projecting a lot here, but I think that with Britain, it would make us more apathetic and just a bit, we'd be like Wookiees. We'd just be like, oh, whatever. Just let the Empire in. They'll collapse before we die. So
that's the thing. It's like what we talked about in the first, it was not the brain pill, about stereotypical Jesus, is that if you know you have forever to do something. Exactly. It can wait.
Exactly. So I just kind of feel like it could go one way or the other. And I think it would depend on society's relationship with longevity and death in the first place, and how much of a transition it is to them suddenly being able to live for 500 years, and how long society has to adjust to that. And
how long do dogs and cats live?
Yeah,
because if they still have their same lifespan, I don't want a part of that world. I don't want I don't want my heart broken every dozen years for 500 years. Yeah. No, I'm not strong enough to deal with that.
I'm with you on that one. Definitely.
Yeah, because I'm still hoping that within the next 5 to 7 years, science figures out a way to clone my dogs and make it reasonably priced. So make that happen.
And to clone them in a way that's going to be about their personality and it's going to capture them exactly.
Exactly. Or extend their life. I will give that up for myself if I can extend their life.
Oh, that's cute. But yeah, I totally would. And I think that because of we're basically not even the blink of an eye in cosmic terms. Like, we're just like a little blip. And that kind of gives us a bit of impetus to get up and actually do something. Like, if you think we're probably about 50% done now. So,
Yeah, I mean, my grandmother lived to be 97. So if that's the case, then I'm at middle age. But like the rest of my grandparents were, and my dad, it's like 80s. So I'm past middle age.
My grand died at 59. So I'm nearly an OAP. So
there was a show called The Unusuals. It was a cop show. It was on a while ago. It was only one season of it. Actually, what's his name? Jeremy Renner, the guy who plays Hawkeye. He was and it was such a clever show because it was 1 or 2 seasons. So it follows these police officers, and they're kind of consider themselves the unusuals. It was like a dramedy, and they all have these like weird kind of quirks or whatever. And one of the guys in it, I don't know the actor's name, but he was on Oz. It's not going to come to me because I don't know his name, but he's a great actor. And so he is, I think, like 40 or 41 when the show starts, and his dad and his dad's dad, and like going back a couple of generations, all died at 42. So his like unusual is that as his 42nd birthday is looming, he believes that it is his fate to die at 42 because so many of his past ancestors have. So he spends all of his time, like, his house is covered in bubble wrap, and like he's really careful and cautious because he knows, or he believes, that that's going to happen. And then the show ends before we find out. Sadly, the show got canceled, so we don't know how it turns out. But like, that was his little unusual, is that like he thought it was coming. He knew, as far as he was concerned, that was his expiration date, and he was trying to like prevent it from happening.
That's hilarious. And the funny thing is when people get stuck in a mode like that, they can end up making it happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like when you read the horoscopes, right? Like I used to work with someone who would read her horoscope every morning. And then she'd be like, this is going to happen today. She's like, I'm going to meet a dark-haired stranger today. It's like, but now that you've read that, every dark-haired stranger, you're going to think like, hey.
Yeah, I love you.
Yeah, it was like, if you insist on reading it, read it at the end of the day and then like see, did any of it actually come to pass? Otherwise, you're just going to manifest these things and make them happen, which may not be a bad thing, right? Like if she thought she was going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger, and then when ended up in the elevator, she may be a little bit more like, "Hey, guy," instead.
Or it could be one very awkward elevator trip.
It could be, right? She's like, he's like, yeah, thanks.
Or just looking at his phone, not even noticing.
This was back in the day before phone. The phones were still. They were still this big at the time.
Do you want a useless fact about those old phones? Yeah, I'll give you one. So basically, they did a study where they found a businessman would use them as what's called a lecking device. Spelled Lekking. And lecking is what animals do, usually the males, to show how, I guess, reproductively fit they are. So it's like, this is what you get. Like the man with the ceiling fans and the crown molding.
Yeah,
he's lecking. So he's showing off. So
yeah, I mean, what do they call it when peacocks do it? They're like
that's it. It's lecking. That's exactly it. And
I learned a new word today.
Yeah, what they were doing was they'd get like these businessmen and they sort of observe them in their natural habitat. And so it's literally men sitting there talking, and then they'd get a woman to come over. And then they start doing stuff like getting their phones out, putting their phone on the table. And it's just like, they don't even realize they're doing it. And they're like, oh, I've got to take a call. Yeah.
My fancy watch.
Yes, exactly. And
it's like when like, if like, you know, a guy offers you his arm. Yeah. And then you take it and then instantly there's like the flex.
Yeah.
Feel my bicep. It's always
Feel how strong I am.
If freedom is simply being able to do what you want, are animals freer than humans?
No and no. Because if you assume that that's what freedom means, but in my view of that, freedom actually comes with ethics and responsibility. And also animals, they have their hierarchies too, and they have their own rules. So yeah, I just know. What do you think?
Looks like we're gonna have time for one more, because I agree. Like Gozer and Zool can do what they want. Every time someone walks past the house, they want to go fuck them up. I'm not allowed.
Exactly. Well, with the foster kittens and Hester, like she's always training them and like she's helping socialize them. So if they get out of hand, she just hits them and whacks them across the face, and then they sort it out and then they don't do it again.
I think it's like freedom to do what you want within some social norms and boundaries. Like you just can't just like walk up to somebody and smack them if you want. Like there's got to be some sort of checks and balances to make sure that like, yes, you can do it as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Exactly. Back to that. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
It all comes down to don't be a dick.
Stop.
Does a person's name influence the person they become? I actually read a study about this once.
Oh, interesting. Okay, then. I think to some extent, yes. Like, I think it could be a factor. So it'd be a small amount that can influence what they become. But maybe not that big an influence. But what did you read?
So I read, and this is, it's been a long time. I don't know the name of the study. I don't know what year it was published in. I know nothing other than the factoids I am about to share with you is my disclaimer. That when men or young boys are given eccentric or unusual names, they have a harder time adjusting to those names, and they get bullied more, and their personalities kind of are negatively impacted because then they become different from the norm. Whereas young girls who are given eccentric or unusual names develop personality traits to mirror them. So if they are given like if everyone else is a Michelle and you're a Solstice, then
Solstice,
right, like your personality will develop so that it mirrors the name a little bit more, and you may still get bullied, but at the end of it, your personality may tend to either be the more creative or more aligned with what the name is. So it could influence.
That makes sense.
I know for myself, so my first name is a very uncommon name, and in my entire life, I have met two people who have one who has the same name as me and one who has a variation of my name. So it is not it's not a common name. So growing up in school, when like everyone was a Jennifer, everyone was a Michelle, there was a GVizzle, and and it was just me. And so like I did get some bullying for it, and I kind of didn't like my name for like, grade 4, 5, and 6, when everybody else was like bonding over being Jennifers. I didn't have that. But then when I got into like grade 7, 8, 9 and higher, when I would see like the first day of school, Jennifer, which one? And they'd be like GVizzle, and I'm like, so I feel like, I mean, I don't feel like my personality is, I don't know how you would define a GVizzle personality, but I think it kind of forced me to perhaps adapt to things a little bit differently, because I didn't have that name, because I dreaded the first 5 minutes of school every year, because when they did the roll call, it was always like GVizzle, GVizzle, and I was like,
GVizzles.
That's what it is. So I knew that was coming, and then all the heads would turn to the GVizzle to see like, who the fuck is that? But it's developed into, I'm very thankful, because I was almost Cecilia.
Oh, okay.
But then I had a cousin who was born a month before I was, and my aunt named her Cecilia. So my mom was like, fuck, we need a new name. So
interesting.
So that's how I got mine.
Going back to the question as well, like having to deal with that through your through really important developmental phases in your life, that's probably actually made you a stronger, sort of more robust individual, because you had those difficulties and that pain early on of having to deal with that. So your system had time to adjust to it.
That's a good point. And it's made me less fussy or less precious about things like that. Like when people mispronounce my name all the time, and that's fun. Like sometimes they feel bad when they mispronounce it. And I'm like, you know what? It's not a name that's like my brother doesn't know how to spell my name, right?
Really?
So,
that's hilarious.
half my family doesn't know how to spell my name. So like for someone who has only met me a handful of times, if you're going to mispronounce it, you get all the passes. Like I'm not going to be fussy about it. And because it's not a common name, it's difficult to assign a gender to it. So I'm often misgendered. I'm often called Mr., which again, okay, whatever. Like it doesn't, I don't care.
Yeah.
So it's I'm not precious about it, but I do enjoy having a different name. Although when I worked in a call center, it's a nightmare, because like I would answer the phone like, thank you for calling, this is GVizzle, how may I help you? What's your name? GVizzle. And then like I remember a handful of times having like a 2-minute conversation about my name and like, how do you spell it? Where is it from? And then they'd be like, okay. And then like after all of that, right? Like, here's how it's spelled. Here's the history of my name. Here's where it comes from. And then they would be like, all right, so Gwen, what I need you to do for—
Oh my God.
Thanks, George. No problem.
Yeah, I've definitely got one of those very common names. And also you shouldn't trust, they say don't trust a man with 2 first names. I've got 3 first names.
My husband has 4.
Oh, wow. Quadruple don't trust.
Yeah. I've heard that too. I've also heard not to trust a man who wears a colored shirt with a white collar.
Yeah. So
that was my grade 10 English teacher who said that. So I think she probably just got burned once. And
yeah. Should have looked out for other teachers in the school that wore those shirts. Could have uncovered something.
I did. My grade 10 science teacher, whom I had a crush on. So I was like, that girl's crazy. He's like, beauty.
Yeah. I didn't have any teachers like that I could have a crush on. Rubbish.
Oh, that's a shame. Just the one. Just the one. Yeah.
There's usually at least one, isn't there? But
if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a 1980s TV sitcom and then all your teachers are 22 years old and gorgeous.
Yeah. And wear the wrong kind of clothes for school.
Exactly. So let me ask you a question. I know we're both child-free by choice, but if you had children, would you give them an unusual name or a very common name?
I don't know. Because a lot of the Welsh names for girls are really nice, like Afannin or Anwyn or Anwen, things like that. And so I think like that'd be quite nice for a girl, but like to me, those aren't unusual names. So they might be unusual to other people. Like
it depends. Like my name, I mean, even in Portugal, my name's not that common, but it would be more common than it would here. But it would certainly not be like considered. Yeah, no, it would be still uncommon there. Like occasionally I'll like Google my first name to see like what comes up, and there's like 2 or 3 on Facebook who all live in Brazil. It's like,
to send them letters.
I'm like, you're a GVizzle, I'm a GVizzle.
Yeah. GVizzles of the world unite.
We'll form a group.
And then I think I don't like names that are too boring, but that might just be because I have a boring name. So like I'm a bit like, but I'm not going to go off and call my kid Tyrion or something.
Well, like I think there's a fine line between, like, my name was not a typical name, but it was also not trying to be different, right? Like I grew up in a very multicultural area where there were tons of different ethnicities in the school that I went to. So like unusual names were not unusual. Like there were lots of very different names, but they were not different to those ethnicities, right? Like I went to school with I'm not gonna share names, but like in their culture, they were not unusual names. So they were unusual for like the other white kids we went to school with, but they're very accepting of it. Whereas now I think like we see this trend of people just being different for the sake of being different.
Yeah.
Like that woman who named her daughter Absidy, but it's spelled ABCDE.
Oh yeah. Why?
And like, and like I think you almost are maybe setting like Elon Musk. You could almost just be like, my parents didn't know they were setting me up for bullying when they named me what they named me, because it was just a name that they came from. But like at some point you've got to know that like your kids are pricks, right?
Yeah.
Like they will find something to pick on you about. And like, yes, we shouldn't bully and blah, 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 but it happens.
Yeah.
So like you're almost setting your kids up for misfortune.
Yeah. For a bad time for like 18 years of their life.
Yeah, until they either like grow into it or they decide like, I'm Jen now. My name is Jennifer. Yeah,
I'm changing my name.
Yeah, but even I, like, if I go somewhere where they ask my name, like if I go to Starbucks, I won't. I'm not. I'm Beth. Like that.
Yeah.
I don't need to get into that right now. Just go with it.
Yeah. Did you watch Game of Thrones at all? No, I didn't think you would. I didn't get Game of Thrones vibes off you. But do you know the character Daenerys? Have you heard of her?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so
I've seen enough Game of Thrones memes that I kind of feel like I know who everybody is.
Excellent. So she kind of has a bit of a weird last season, okay? But like because of the first 3 or 4 seasons, loads of people had called their kids Daenerys or Khaleesi and all of that. And then so by the time the last season came, you had all these sort of 3 to 5-year-olds with the names after this character. But nobody had bothered to actually watch the show properly or read the books to realize that she's got a bit of a screw loose and might be a bit volatile. And then she flipped in the final season. And and then everybody wanted to.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was on Reddit and I was on the Am I the Asshole again, because I love it there. And so this particular one, this couple they're expecting their first child. They're expecting a boy. And the family name that like that grandfather gave to great grandfather gave to like was Theodore. Their last name, although not spelled Bundy, is pronounced Bundy. So now the dad wants to name the kid Theodore Bundy, which is going to be Ted Bundy. And the mom is like, we can't do that to our kid. So like, they knew what they were getting themselves into. Like, you need to know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God.
But I think it's kind of like, and I guess we'll see waves of it, right? Like, I know you have a cat named Hermione, but like in, 15 years, there's going to be a ton of, teenage Hermione's. Like,
yeah.
Like it's all the waves.
Hermione isn't named after Harry Potter Hermione. She's named after Winter's Tale Hermione. So.
Oh.
I don't know Winter's Tale. This Joanna.
So. But still.
Yeah.
If she was a person, she'd be saying that to everybody. It's not that Hermione.
Yeah. It's Winter's Tale Hermione. No. Don't you know?
Peasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes through all those waves of names. I think we need to bring back like the old school names. Some of them were quite lovely.
What do you think of the name Lucifer? Because that was quite common up until like the 50s, I think.
You know what? It sounds good. Like it is a good sounding name. I think Lucifer would probably be better than like Mephistopheles or something.
How tempting would it be to put little plastic horns on his head when the grandmother comes around?
Just get him some like contact lenses. It is a beautiful name. There's not a lot like that have that such negative connotation for women. Maybe I don't know, Rosemary, because Rosemary's Baby.
Karen.
Do you know there was like a time, I think it was like after November 2013 or some recent year, there was like, I think a 2-year stretch where nobody named their babies Karen. So I will fade to black. And if you're able to get it on the drive.